Last month, we celebrated our 50th anniversary. We were very proud of that. Bill Jackson was noted for his participation in it. And Bill Jackson has a few words this evening about somebody else very important. And I'd like him to do that right now.
Thank you, Kurt. March 23rd, we lost one of our founders, Jack Thomas. Those of you who are relatively new, Jack has been attending meetings, but he suffered severe diabetes. He was being helped by his friend, Carolyn Gross, to come to the meetings and guide him into his seat. Jack was 61 years old. He helped me found the Hershey Civil War Roundtable in 1991. And then after the 50th anniversary, when World War II started in 1990, and through that we began to say, why don't we start a World War II roundtable? Because we don't need the authors and the historians, we still got the guys. So we finally put it all together in March of 2003. And Jack was one of our founders for that. He was a consummate historian. He had received a certificate of recognition from the Pennsylvania State Legislature for his contributions to Civil War history. And those of us that go all the way back, we're sure going to miss him. Thank you, Carol.
Thanks, Bill. And in his honor, all the proceeds from our book sales outside tonight will go to the Civil War Roundtable, which he founded. And so dig deep and read a book. Okay, what are the next? Okay, it's April. We've made it this far. Late breaking news. I just heard on CNN, you can believe anything they say, that spring will arrive sometime within the next 3 weeks. Followed shortly thereafter by fall. But in April, now let's talk about 1945 for a minute. You're going to hear a lot about things that went on, but 1945, a few significant things happened, personnel-wise. On April 12, 1945, after suffering a massive cerebral hemorrhage, President Roosevelt died. Never saw the end of the war. Neither did actually Benito Mussolini, because on April 28th, he and 12 of his former cabinet officers were executed. So they never saw the end of the war. What a loss. On April 30th, 1945, anybody know what happened then? That's not all see the same hands. Adolf Hitler. Russian shells were falling on Berlin. He marries his mistress, Eva Braun, in his bomb-proof Berlin bunker, then poisons her and kills himself. What a wonderful married couple. Didn't mean to give anybody any ideas. His remains were never recovered, supposedly, at least by anybody we know. A week later, Germany surrendered, and that was the end of the war in Europe. It took 5 months more to end the war in the Pacific, but nonetheless, the end was near. That's what we have from April. Now, we have Charlie Lloyd to tell you about April 2018. If you guys knew the amount of effort Charlie Lloyd puts into digging out our speakers and all the things that happened, you'd be astounded. I am astounded and very humbled by his activities. Thank you, Charlie.
It's about that raise we were talking about? Okay. Welcome, everybody. I'm glad we have a great crowd. I'm going to fall here. Tonight's the easiest night in the world for me because all I have to do is introduce one person. And he's going to make an introduction to our speaker. And the person I'm going to introduce is WWII, who has an outstanding program in Dillsburg. The second one is the
Second Saturday in August.
second. Why don't you talk about it? You know more about it than me, okay? Yeah. And I've been there. In fact, I just told Kirk and Doug, I was there 2 years ago. I walked in, all of a sudden I heard, Charlie, Charlie. And I turned around. How many of you remember Art, Staymates? That was Art. And that's where I saw him over at Doug's, and he was there every year. So that's a good place to be. At that point, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. WWII. Thank you very much.
In case you didn't catch the date, the World War II tribute in Dillsburg is August 11th. Write it down, put it on your personal devices. Love to see you all there, because I have met so many wonderful people, and especially the veterans of World War II. And about 4 years ago, a gentleman I should have known wanted to speak, Ben Jenkins. Turns out I taught his grandkids. Little did I know, but he said he wanted to speak. And then the entertainment began. Because for the next 4 years, he doesn't tell the same story twice. And most of them, probably, he's not able to tell in a church. However, they are amazing stories, both in active duty and behind the scenes. And some of the most notable stories he can tell are the ones behind the scenes, the ones where he interacted with Marines, for example. But he won't tell that one here. You can ask him about it later. But he has some wonderful stories, and I'm going to let him tell you. Ben Jenkins was born in Lancaster, but later adopted Dillsburg as his home. His service in World War II was as a B-29 crewman in Central Fire Control, assigned to the 20th Air Force, 315th Bomber Wing, 357th Squadron in the Pacific Theater. After the war, Ben went on to earn a degree from Millersville State Teachers College. His career included 12 years as a teacher and administrator, including 2 years in Dillsburg's Northern Joint School District as an elementary principal and supervisor before taking a job with the State Department of Education, the Bureau of Instructional Media Services. He has 1,000 stories. I hope he can tell at least 10 or 12 good ones tonight. Mr. Ben Jenkins.
Well, I have to get used to the sound. Do you want a chair or do you want to stand?
No, I can stand.
Thank you.
Doug always warned me, you're in a church, and so there's no profanity, no vulgarity. And so that ruins 3 of my best jokes. I had the misfortune, or maybe it was a good fortune, of being a 16-year-old high school senior. And it had a lot of problems. When I was in the high school, I became a vocational student, and I was going to be an automobile mechanic, and everybody wanted to be an automobile mechanic. But the war was going on, and they needed maintenance people at Armstrong Linoleum in Lancaster. So Mr. McMahon came to several of us and said that we'd like you to change your trade. And so, well, what do we do? So about 6 of us went into the plant. I still was the youngest one. I was the biggest one too, so they sort of took me as a big dumb farmer. All the people working there were men of age or men of disabilities, and so here these 4 young fellows looked perfectly normal, and we got called all sorts of names: draft dodgers and slackers and 4F. And so every place you went, I decided I was going to enlist. And the 4 of us went to the recruiting office in Lancaster. They took 3 of them because they were 17. But I wasn't 17 yet. So the guy told me that when you get to be old enough, you come in and you can enlist. And so, well, I want to enlist in the Army Air Corps. So he said, oh, well, don't you call us, we'll call you. And so I had to wait a year again. And during that time I was working at Armstrong's. They told me to join the Civil Air Patrol. And so I did. And every Saturday, or sometimes on Sundays, we'd go out to the airport, and these people who owned airplanes, who belonged to the Civil Air Patrol, would take you for rides in the airplane. You were supposed to be an observer looking to see what was happening. So about the time, oh, thank you very much. About the time I turned 18, and I walked into the recruiting office, and the same recruiting sergeant was there. He said, "I told you, we'll call you when we're ready." So about 3 weeks later, I got a call, and he sent me to New Cumberland Army Depot for being clothed and what have you. Well, with the Civil Air Patrol, I had a leather bomber's jacket. In those days, it was a very expensive thing. And I had Army pants, and I had a shirt with 2 epaulets. And it didn't look like anything the Army had. And when I went in to get my clothing, I walked down this aisle, and the first thing that they did is, "What size are you?" And I said, "Well, I guess the best thing to be," I think my suit coat was a 42. And so they go down, and the first jacket I got was a 48. And I think they were trying to make a point. So, okay, the pants, the waist was nice. It was a size 32 trousers, but 35. And so you put them on, and you had to roll up the cuffs. And they were really trying to make a monkey out of me. And what I was trying to do is I would just stand there right with them and go along with it. Well, till we got to the end of the line, I had all my clothing, and everything was heavy wool, what have you. And I said to him, "Where are we going to be stationed?" And the guy said, "Miami, Florida." So we got going to Miami. We went down from New Cumberland. We went on the railroad down, going through. It's awful when you can't think of the names of the. We were about. Okay, going down on the railroad. The railroad train stopped at a siding, and there were some gray ladies there. I don't know if you knew what gray ladies were, but gray ladies were like an emergency Red Cross. And what they would do is they would take care of the people coming through there. And so these ladies were standing by our railroad car, and they were handing out apples and sandwiches. And the cutest little lady, real small, she couldn't reach up to the windows where we were. So I had my one buddy with me. I said, "Well, just wait a minute. I'll get us a couple of sandwiches." And I got off of the train and walked to this lady, and I got 2 apples and 2 sandwiches. And when I went to get back on the train, 2 MPs got me. And they made a big fuss. And I should tell you a little bit about my training to take care of things like this. My dad was a cop. And he was born in Wales and came over here. And my mother was born here in Pennsylvania. And she was German and Swiss. So everybody said, "Well, what are you? What are you?" I said, "Well, I really don't know. I think I'm German and Swiss Welsh mixed with alcohol." Okay, we're on the train. These 2 MPs put me back on the train, and this one was chewing. He was really bawling me out. And of course, with the training I had from my dad, because my dad was always bawling me out anyway. So I learned I wouldn't look at his face. I'd look over his head and listen, let him rant and rave. And so we get back on the train after this. They put us in the car. The railroad car had the railroad train had one car was a kitchen for the troops on the train. Mm-hmm. And I figured, well, I'll get into trouble here somehow. So this mess sergeant said, he said, what are you doing? And I told him, and they said, the EP's put me on here. He said, okay, quarter that cabbage. And he had about 40 heads of cabbage there. And so I just took a knife and I quartered it. And he came back and said, I told you to cut the cores out. And I said, no, you told me to quarter it. So I started again, and I had a container, just like a moderate, almost the size of a garbage can, but 30, I think it was 32 gallons of cabbage, and I put water in there, and there's a corporal cook there. He lit the fire under the cabbage, and everything started to boil. And the mess sergeant came through and said, what are you doing? And I told him I got the cabbage ready. He said, well, what seasoning did you put in this? I didn't put any seasoning in. And he pointed to the window, there was a shelf over there, and there were several bags, cloth bags. And he said, dump one of those in there. And so I did. I took the first one I found, and I ripped it open, dumped it in, and I didn't know it, but it was sugar. There comes that mess sergeant again, and he's chewing again. It's lucky I had a bottom left on that one. He's really giving it to me. So I still don't look him in the eye and don't laugh. And so we fed all the troops. We had boiled potatoes and cabbage and something else. I don't remember what that was. But he came in and he said, give me some of the cabbage. And the corporal was in charge there. He said, I can't. He said, what do you mean you can't? He said, it's all gone. And so there was one or two of the, you know how cabbage separates when you cut the core out? One or two pieces of cabbage in the bottom of the barrel, and he got it. Well, you'll ruin it, you'll ruin it. Well, there was nothing left to ruin. It was all gone. And the next time that we got near the kitchen, I asked him knead them a little bit. How was that cabbage? And he said, it's the first time that they ever had 32 gallons of cabbage eaten in one meal. We went on down to Florida, and I don't know how I did it. I was a spoiled. I was big for my age, and I had been seasoned. My dad was not gentle. If I did something wrong, I found out about it. And so when I do something wrong in the Army, I'm just a country boy. And we got down to Miami, Florida, and the first thing they took us to the Fontainebleau Hotel. Now I think the Fontainebleau is still there, but maybe the name is still there. Maybe it's a new one. But we went into this place and looked, and everybody said, "Oh, man, we're going to live like kings." At that time, another guy comes out. No, you're not. You're going over to the Churchill Arms Apartments. And so it was a 3-story building, and we had, at that particular time, we had 48 rural recruits coming down. We went into this place, and we lived there for quite some time, but right outside of the apartments, they were building an obstacle course and showing off. I had to run that obstacle course. It wasn't complete yet, but I ran the obstacle course. And in that obstacle course, they were putting up an 8-foot fence. And you would run and you'd get up over that fence. This was our third week in Miami. Run, and I, just for the heck of it, I was told I wasn't allowed to be there, but I was running it anyway. And after the third or fourth time, the third or fourth day, I was running the obstacle course, and it looked like it was in pretty good shape. And I went up and I hit the wall, that big wooden wall there that you had to climb over, and it fell on me. And so there I am, all messed up, It was a big joke for everybody but me. Anyway, the wall tore my leg in such a way that they had to strip the vein out of my leg. And that put me in the hospital for about 15 days. And when I was in the hospital, this flight surgeon, Major Fagan was his name, he came in and said, "Soldier, I've got good news for you and bad news for you." And I said, "Well, please give me the good news first." And he said, "Good news, you're going to be out of the Army in about 15 days. And I didn't want to be out of the Army. It took me 2 years to get in. So I thought, well, if I got out, I'd go back to where I'd be a slacker and a 4F and a draft dodger and all. So I said, "Well, is there anything I can do?" He said, "You might be able to exercise enough to get your leg to work right." What had happened in this operation, my heel was about an inch off the ground. I could walk on my toes, but not on that heel. Well, with weightlifting and running and more running, I finally got in about 3 weeks. I got back into another group, and there's some stories in there I could tell you, but I'm not allowed to tell. They decided, okay, now you finished your basic training, and actually I think basic training was supposed to be 8 weeks, and I only had basic training for about 4 weeks the rest of the time. So we're going to ship you out. I must tell you this story. These baggy clothes I had, and the wool clothes, on the same hotel we were, or right next to it, they were in the Indian River. They had a OCS program, Officers Candidate School, and all these young fellows with their tailored uniforms, and all of the GIs looked kind of ragged. So what I did, I said to this guy, "Where'd you get your uniform tailored?" And he said, "Well, you go down here to the Rooney Plaza Hotel and go down in the basement. There's a tailor down there." So I went to this Rooney Plaza with my suntan uniform, which was more like a tent. And I walked in and I told him what I wanted. And he said, "Well, take off your shirt." So I took off my shirt and turned it inside out and put it back on. And he stood there and took pins and pinned all the sides. And took it off again. He put it on the sewing machine. It looked real nice. So I got my pants shortened to the right size, and we go out at night almost every night, running around someplace. Oh, I'll tell you one story about that too. We walked down the street in Miami. They didn't have the street lights like we have here. You have a light about every 2 blocks down. Anyway, with all these young men from the OCS school, they would all look real sharp. And I'd walk down the street with my tailored uniform, and I was getting all sorts of salutes. And that was really fun. He's a guy saluting a 6-week-old soldier. Anyway, I was going to tell you a story. Oh, the story. In the apartments where we were living, the newspaper came out, and in that newspaper they said that this lady was a performer, and she was going to perform in some of the nightclubs in Miami Beach. So one guy says, "Yeah, they're going to perform there. We'll never get to see it." So I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "They won't let you in." So I said, "Okay." I said, "I'll bet you $1 I can get in." And so everybody wanted to bet me $1. So what I did is I went down like on a Tuesday night, and there was a bar in front of their show place, and I went in there and I ordered a beer. And the guy said to me, "How old are you, son?" I said, what does it matter? He said, "Are you allowed to drink beer?" I said, "Well, sure, I've been drinking beer for years." So I bought him, I bought a beer for me and a beer for him. And there was a guy down in about 20 feet down who's the door tender for this where the show was going to be. So I bought him a beer too. And I thought, this cost me 75 cents. So I thought, well, if I win this bet, I'd still. So they turned me away. So Tuesday night, Wednesday night, I went down, bought 75 cents worth of beer for other people. And they especially talked to the guy that was the bouncer. And he was saying about how these people want to get in there all the time. And I said to him, well, if you want another beer, I'll buy it for you. So I left Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday I did this. And I made a point of talking to the bouncer and to the bartender. And after visits like that, they thought they knew me. So I took the 3 guys who were rooming in the same room with me down there, and we went to go in, and they said, "Pet, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're going to do the show." And the guy said, "Oh, no, you're too young." And I said, "Too young? They're old enough to be here, and they're all older than me." But he did not. I was 18 years old in 6 weeks. Anyway, they let us in, and we saw this. The lady was a tassel dancer. I don't know if you know what a tassel dancer is. She could put these tassels in places on her body and shake and jive around. Oh, it was really terrific. Well, after we got back to our hotel, everybody wanted me to take them down there. So there's Doug yet. It's all right to tell that. Okay. We left Miami and we're going back up north. So great. So they put us in trucks, and I said, these trucks aren't going to go back up north. So they put us in trucks and took us over the Tamiami Trail, Alligator Alley, and took us up Naples. And then there was Buckingham Army Air Force Base at Fort Myers, Florida. And that's where we were introduced to live ammunition. And so we went to school. You had to learn to take a machine gun apart and put it back together so that it would work. But what they would do to you is they put a blindfold on you, and then they take the machine gun apart and hand you the parts. Well, what I did with the parts, I put them where I knew they were, each one. And I heard someone messing with the table where I was working. And so I said, okay. So when I went to put the gun back together, I picked each piece up and run my hand across the bottom to see if there were any broken parts. And I managed to, on the first try, I managed to get that machine gun back. And of course, would you like to be permanent parties? No. I'm an air cadet. I'm going to get back in the Air Corps somehow. And it never happened, but it was my goal. So, and we went on to using machine guns. And one of my friends had gone ahead of me, and he was telling me all of the things that he did when he was going through. And so I would memorize what he was telling me. And one of the things he told me the most was, they'll give you these machine guns, and you see the movies where they're firing. Well, chances were they weren't hitting anything, because when the machine gun would fire, the recoil would, the pattern might be 16 feet in diameter. And so this fellow Dick Gray says to me, what you do is just 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So there's a song. I got rhythm, I got music, and I did that. Well, fortunately, on these different gunning ranges, when you were firing a gun, they would have all your ammunition, the projectile on the ammunition would have been dipped in paint. And when you fired it at the target, the green mark would appear on the target. Well, then they brought the funniest looking thing. They had it it's just a big rut. And the Jeeps would go around there, and they have a pole up, and they'd have one of these socks, targets on that. So you couldn't hit the Jeep or the target. But when this guy came by with it, I'm shooting with my guy. I got rid of him. Again, would you like to become permanent party? I said, no. So we went from there, from putting machine guns back together and firing things like that. They were picking crews out, and for somehow or other, I didn't get picked. And not somehow or other. I was just a wise guy, a smart fellow. and I could cause more confusion and make more people wonder. And the one fellow said to me one day, he said, I hope you know what you're doing. I said, oh, I think I know what I'm doing. I said, my dad taught me that when our 4 brothers were doing anything and we got in trouble, his favorite expression was, gee whiz, don't just stand there looking stupid. At least act like you know what you're doing. And so I use that every time I get into some kind of a mess. Act like you know what you're doing. And so, or the other one was take advantage of the situation. And a situation would come up and I'd take advantage of race game. We got through all those schools and I went to Alamogordo, New Mexico, Holman Air Force Base in Alamogordo, New Mexico, and I was assigned to a crew there. And these guys on the crew I was on, they were as bad as me. They were always in trouble. We had a good time. We trained, and well, in the Air Corps, it was training, and we made a joke out of it. Different people say, oh, are you in services? No, I'm in the Air Corps. We went on in Alamogordo, and we trained, and they made up a couple of real good crews, and they sent these crews to McCook, Nebraska. And McCook, Nebraska was our first real organization. The whole way up the line, you would wonder how we could win a war with what we were watching in the early part there. All the foul balls, and I was one of them. We got to McCook, Nebraska, and got a crew, and so they were sending troops down to Kingston, Jamaica. We owned the airport down there through some Lend-Lease thing, and they sent us to Kingston, Jamaica, and down there we were firing guns and having a good time. And that was a bad place for wise guys because you could buy anything you wanted down there, and we did. When we got back to McCook, Nebraska, and we were flying practice, dropping those little white bombs that make dust all over the bomb range, and we one day one of the fellows came in and he said, "Do you want to go to Louisville, Kentucky?" And I said, "Sure." "What for?" And he said, "Well, they're getting a crew together to go to Louisville." So I volunteered for that. Lo and behold, we were going into Louisville, Kentucky. North America made P-51s there, a P-51 fighter plane. And the P-51 fighter plane could land in about 200 feet of runway. A B-29 couldn't. A B-29, you had your mile and a half on a B-29 to land there. So I thought, oh, we're in trouble. So they called us into the operations and told us what we would have to do. And we stripped the airplane of everything that we could take off. So the the day before we were getting ready to go home, our flight engineer said, "Do you want to stay over another night?" I said, "That'd be nice." So he went out. The B-29 has 4 engines, and they have a supercharging system on there. And on the supercharging system, there's a weak stone bridge that has what we call the wiper arm. And the wiper arm would activate with your engine speed. And so what someone did, I don't blame anyone, what someone did, they took the wiper arm and the wire that came to it, and they wrapped the wire around the wiper arm, and so that it could only get up to about half speed. And there was no way that they were going to try to take a B-29 off with an engine that was running at half speed. So we went into the Brownstone Hotel and partied, and we had a real good time. And there were a lot of co-eds there from the University of Kentucky, and we paired up and danced and carried on like kids do. And about 11:30, the girls had to go. They had to be back in their college campus by midnight. So they left, and my one buddy said, "Hey, let's go for coffee." I said, "Okay." So the other buddy said, No. Let's use room service." I said, "Okay." Well, we were partying, and of course, don't tell anybody. We were only 18. We were partying and we were boozing it up a little bit, which was kind of standard operation procedure for it. Well, I said, "Okay." So I got on the phone and called down and sent us 4 cups of coffee and 8 pastries. And they did. And since I made the phone call when they came up, I went to get my wallet out to pay, and I got my wallet out, but nobody else did. And I looked, and I got it pretty much, well, they were all broke. So I put that $32 for 4 cups of coffee and 8 pastries. So this one fellow says, "Hey, I think he bought that coffee pot." Well, I didn't. I said, "Well, yeah, but how are we going to get it out of there?" It wasn't going to be me. So how are we going to get it out? So the one guy in the morning snuck it in with his gear, and we got the Louisville Hotel coffee pot and took it to Guam with us. But we kept it. But we had the coffee pot for a year on Guam. It was still there when I left. This one, I guess, being the biggest kid in the area and kind of and being kind of spoiled, I would come up with ideas and things to do, and they'd all want to do them. And this one fellow, he was a flight engineer. His name was Dane Sorensen. And he looked at me one day, he said, "You know, Jenk, it's a damn good thing because you're on our side." Anyway, we went back. We got out of Louisville. Well, first of all, we stripped the B-29 of everything we could take off. Every piece of thing that wasn't necessary was laying on the runway there. And we got the engines up to full speed, down the runway, and into the air. And I looked out the window beside me, and I could see the water tower. It was right beside me. It wasn't down. So I thought, uh-oh, we're not going to make it. But we did. We made it and got back. And it was a memorable week in Louisville, Kentucky. Let's go. I don't know how many times I do dumb things, and just for the heck of it, and just more or less to get attention. And I got away with an awful lot of stuff. But you see, in this it was 2nd Air Force. General Arnold from Reading, Pennsylvania was our commander in the 2nd Air Force. And it wasn't organizer wasn't like the when we got up to the bigger groups, and I did I can't tell Dougie what Dougie said. No, we had a lot of fun. And before I forgot something. Charlie told me that since I was Welsh and German, I would have to sing a song in Welsh. And I said, okay, I'll sing a song in Welsh. So I went down to Stewartstown, I think it's called, in York County. And there's a church down there. They do their whole program in Welsh. So I asked them, could they get me a song that I could sing? And lo and behold, in the mail 2 days later, I had a song. And I opened it up. I couldn't sing it. I couldn't even pronounce it. I mean, it was a whole Welsh language. So I didn't have to. I did sing a song to Doug coming up here that maybe when we go off, I won't sing it. The voice is not what it used to be, but it was kind of. When you were in the basic training area, every place you went, you had to sing, and of course, someone would shout out a song title or just a couple words, and then the rest of the group would sing in, and we were blocked from going on certain streets in Miami, Florida, because of the songs we were singing. Especially, we were not allowed to trade anywhere near the WWII area down there. The WWII area was off grounds because, for some reason, the guys would always sing dirty songs in the WWII area. See, he told me I'm not, no profanity, no vulgarities.
Remember, he was a principal and a supervisor in the school.
And we weren't allowed to sing there either. I lost my train here just a minute. I must give you a war story that really wasn't a war story. We come out of the service, and we all wanted to go to college. And of course, being a vocational student, you only had half the time in class. So we had to go back to, they had a section of the McCaskey High School, Veterans High School. And they introduced everybody, and you'll be here about 4 months. And when I went through, every course I took the final examination that the kids in college prep would take. And I passed. I got in trouble that way too. So I went down, and they told me in 3 or 4 months I could catch up and I would have another diploma. I didn't need another diploma. So the first week I did English and social studies, and they looked at me kind of funny. And then the next week I did all my science programs, and by the end of 3 weeks I was ready to leave, and I was the only one ready to leave. The other people were still studying hard to. And I got I went to Franklin Marshall College on an engineering program, and we got there, and there weren't enough people to conduct the program. So Schubert Barr was the dean of men, and he took us up to Penn State. And so they said, well, we'll welcome you here at Penn State, but you'll have to go to one of our satellites. And the satellite, Millersville, it was practically home. And I met a young lady there that I was interested in, and I stayed my 4 years at Millersville. This testing thing, I don't know, well, you know, they were talking about when you go into the service, you have to take a test. I don't know what for, but you take this test, and then they score the test, and they'll tell you what you can be or what you might want to be. And when I went in, it was on a Thursday night, and it was snowing on the ground, or it was Thursday afternoon, it was snowing on the ground, and they sat down and they gave us some papers. It had 100 questions, and they were all multiple choice. So you had 3 possible answers to each question. So I knew most of the questions, and so I filled out the paper, and while everybody's still sitting around, I'm ready to leave again. And I had about 25 or 30 questions I didn't know out of the 100. And so I said, okay, got to do something here. So the first one was eeny, the second one was meeny, and the third one was miny. Now, they weren't in the same row. They'd be like 4 or 5 questions apart. But that was the method I used. And I left the testing area and went back to the barracks. And 2 guys came in and drugged me out of the barracks. And I said, what's this all about? And they took me back to this captain who was giving the test. And he said, do you know what you scored? I said, well, I have no idea. And he said, 140. I said, that's nice. What does it mean? Well, it means you cheated. So I had to sit there. 2 hours later, they called me back in. I had to sit there and take another test just like it. And I fooled them this time. I answered all the questions I knew, and I left those that I didn't know blank. And he come in, he said, I said to him, Captain, how did I make out? He said, well, you're in 130, so it's all right. So I found out that was pretty high, and that helped me. That and my dad's make a good exception of it, and don't stand there looking stupid. I use that all the time. We went to college we walked into the English department, and there's the instructor sitting on the desk, Indian style, legs folded, arms folded, and I got there just a little bit late, and he says, you know, since I got out of, I was a captain in the Army Intelligence. So everybody just looked at him, and I wrote a book. I wrote a dictionary on Army slang. I said, well, that's great. He said, since I've been here back at college, he said, I don't have to read the funny papers anymore. He said, I just look at my students and laugh. Here, the big mouth is sitting there and said, you ought to look at yourself. And he jumped up, who said that? Who said that? So, I was on the verge of getting a new part for my body again. Anyway, I said, well, sir, I missed your early introduction, but I think there's some people in here that you should get to meet. And the back row of the class, all the girls sat in the front, and in the back row, they were all GI guys, captains, majors, lieutenant colonel, commanders. I mean, they were all high. So we went down the line. Each one of these fellows gave his name, rank, and serial number, and where he served. So we got down the end of the road, and there was a young kid down. He was my age, but he was a young kid. And so I pointed my finger and I said, Mr. Name, rank, and serial number. And it's, my name is James J. Bradigan, United Corporal, United States Army. Well, I got thrown out. A couple of the other guys got asked to be. So I got thrown out of the English class, and I thought I was being thrown out of college, but I had to go to the dean, and I had to go to the president, and I had to explain what we were doing. But I said, we weren't interested in his military rank. We were interested in education. Well, I got back in And then I started having fun in school where I don't know, being the youngest of, or one of the youngest of 4 boys in the family, I think I was exposed to everything that anybody could have been exposed to. And even to the point where if I didn't react fast enough, my dad would pop you in the shoulder one day. He hit hard enough to spin you around. So, well, I've taken a lot of your time. Let me tell you this one Air Force song that someone made up. We couldn't find who made it up, but it was, girls say no to some handsome soldier, and he'll know just what she means. Doesn't that tune sound familiar? She'll say stop to some pushy sailor, and on the serene. Now Marines come rough, but if you treat them rougher, they'll come back fighting for more. But girls find out beyond a doubt that nothing can stop the Army Air Corps. Oh, I should tell you about the B-29. It was a beautiful airplane. It was 100 feet long, and it was built in like 3 sections. Front section were the officers, the pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, and the radio man was up there, and the radar man was up there. Then there was a tunnel about 20 feet long, about 30 inches high. You couldn't walk in it. You had to crawl on your hands and knees. And you go to the second section of the B-29, and back there was, I missed another point. The second section, there's where one of the big gun turrets had been, but there were two observers there. And then you go back, you come out of the pressurized area and go back into the tail, and the tail gunner was back there by himself. And it was home. It was nice. It was big enough that you could have held a dance in that second section. Would have been. The plane flew somewhere in the neighborhood of 245 to 280 miles an hour, air miles. Before we went into combat on Guam, General Curtis LeMay came to the different wings and told them what he was going to do. The B-29 couldn't fly far enough for some of the bombing missions, so what they did is they took all of the gun turrets off, all of the armament, and you were armed with a .45 revolver. That's another story too. On this one practice mission, we came back, and it was about 3 days before the big raid. We came back, and Smart Aleck Jenkins was leading the group back into operations, and the voice on the over the speakers started, "The war is over," and so, bull. And I pulled my .45 out, and if I would have aimed, I probably would have missed it. But boom, and I blew that darn speaker right off the tree. And they made me pay $35 for that. So, well, I think I've taken a lot of time. Do you have any questions or answers? Dougie, what else did I miss?
I don't know. How did you occupy yourself again while you were up there in that B-29 with nothing to do?
They would. He's trying to make me a glutton. On a bombing mission, they would give you 2 containers. Each container had enough food in for 10 people. or one person 10 times. Anyway, I always made sure that one of those containers was near me. And I got my share. I'd end up with maybe 3 or 4 cans of soup and 4 or 5 sandwiches. Some of the people, actually it wasn't their fault, but some of the guys, this was a new experience, and you didn't see crying, but you saw tears. A lot of the guys were scared, but what can you do? I mean, if you're that scared, you shouldn't be there in the first place. We on the bombing mission, there's one that I missed it. On the bombing mission, it was called the Last Raid. On this bombing mission, every airplane in the 20th Air Force was in the air on that raid. And some say there were as many as 800 airplanes. I don't think there were that many, but every airplane was on that raid. And we flew, we took off at 4 o'clock at night, and we flew, and we crossed the ocean there, and we came to right over Tokyo, and it was just about midnight in Tokyo, so you already had 8 hours sitting there looking. You couldn't see much, but you had to look. And we flew directly over Japan and into the Japanese Sea and did a hard right turn and went up about 200 miles and did a hard left turn and came back in over an area called Akita, A-K-I-T-A. And this was a big, big production area where the Japanese were making all their guns in there. And when we went over there, the next day we got a report that 89% of the factories were hit, and about 80% of the factories were destroyed. So we all felt pretty good about that.
What date was that sort of? What was your date? What was the reference date on that? Were we in July at that point or not?
It was 3 days before the end of the war.
There it is.
3 days before. And I have to remember what Doug told me, because other things are coming through my mind here that I'm not allowed to say. I guess unless you have some questions, I'll shut up. Yes?
How many missions did you fly?
Well, see, our group got there late. We flew 2 missions. The first mission was a mission over Tokyo, over into this prison camp. And the second mission was a Red Cross mission. And what we did is, on the Red Cross mission, on that rear bomb bay, we had a platform in there that was about 10 feet long and about 8 feet wide. And you could store about 6 tons of food on. And so we had the airplane was loaded with 6 tons of food. And in each corner of this platform that the food was on, there were parachutes, 2 cargo parachutes in each corner. And one of the guys there said, "Gee, I wish I had one of those yellow parachutes." And he said it 3 or 4 times, and I said, "What the dickens? If you want it that bad, take it." And so he took one of these 2 parachutes, so he took one off. I didn't know it, but someone on the other side had done the same thing. And with the 4 parachutes, the platform would come straight down. With the way we messed it up, it would swing back and forth. And so you've all heard of Major Pappy Boyington in the Marine Corps. Well, he was a prisoner in that war camp, and I'm not sure if the kid from Unbroken was in there too, but
Yes.
I think he was. Yeah. Anyway, all the Japanese guards around the prison camp took off, and there were prisoners there with no food or anything else. So we were dropping this food to them, and as the parachute affected the affect our platform, it would swing back and forth. And so we dropped it, flew on. We were too high to see what was happening. But what had happened is when all of the guards left their bivouac area, or their tent area, the prison was shaped like a big horseshoe. And between the ends of the horseshoe was the guardhouse. And well, this parachute came down, and in such a way, and it swings, and just took the guardhouse and everything around it, took it right off. We thought that was quite an accomplishment. Now, yes, sir.
You started at the beginning of your talk about friends of yours at Armstrong. They were a year older than you, and they were able to enlist a year or two before you got in. Did you keep in touch with those?
I'm sorry I didn't get your question, but I'll come closer.
The friends of yours that I think you were either in school with or you went to Armstrong, and they were a year older or two, and they got able to enlist before you. Did you keep in touch?
They got in the Navy.
Okay, did you keep in touch with them during the war or afterwards?
I met 2 or 3 of them after the war, but then when I got tied up with college, I didn't go visiting anymore. When I was teaching school in New Jersey, we went to Lakehurst. Is that where they had the Derger?
Yeah.
Lakehurst. One of my friends' father was the mayor of Lakehurst, and they showed us a real good time there. The co-pilot of the plane went to college, I think it was called Rutgers or something like that, and he was teaching English in one of the high schools. I'll think of the name of the high school after it too. But no, we didn't really stay. We met half a dozen times, but we didn't stay real close. Yes, somebody over here had a question.
While she's running, let me ask you a question. Now, this is near the end of the war, I take it, that you were flying.
That's right.
Were you still meeting enemy resistance in the air, or were the P-51s flying with you? Or?
No, there was nothing flying. When the B-29s flew, they flew by themselves.
Really?
And if you had 20 of them in the air, they'd be about a minute or 2 apart. And no, we didn't see. There was nothing left from the Japanese Air Force.
Yeah, because last month we were talking about Iwo Jima and how important that was for the P-51s to be able to fly out of there and escort the bombers that needed.
Yeah.
Couldn't. But by that time in the war, we didn't need it.
That was actually my question leads right exactly where you were. But what I wanted to know was when you were stationed out there in Guam and going north towards Japan, there was a twin Mustang was designed, the XB-82. Some of them made it out there. I wondered if you had ever witnessed seeing one, the twin Mustang.
No.
So you were probably it was after your time or just before your time, excuse me, because they were preparing to invade Japan, and the twin Mustangs had the fuel capacity to escort all the way into Japan. That was the design aspect of it, but then the nuclear weapon took care of that. I just wondered because so few of those men would have actually witnessed that in a combat scenario. I just wondered if that was something you had seen.
Well, see, our missions over the target were usually timed that you get there after 11 o'clock at night, before 2 o'clock in the morning, so that our people didn't see much of the Japanese at all. But we dropped an awful lot of stuff on them.
Well, I tell you what, you certainly had an interesting and entertaining military experience, and I want to thank you for sharing with us.
Well, you're quite welcome, I'm sure. We could tell us more stories, but Doug said no.
Yeah. One more story. We were remember you being there, and I want you to make that one, you remember where you were.
Oh, you bet. Thank you very much.
All right?
Yes, sir. Good night.
So up next one, bring a friend. Thank you.